Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Beth DiDomenico is with us to talk about optimizing our immune system function. And so welcome from Methow at Home, Beth. And we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Hey, thank you, Tracy. I'll give you a brief introduction to my background. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I've been a primary care physician in Washington State for 21 years now. And as a naturopath, I don't know what people know about naturopathic medicine, but our specialty really is the use of herbs and nutrition, diet and lifestyle, and something called homeopathy to prevent disease. And a way I like to explain the difference between naturopathic medicine and a medical allopathic medicine is that when allopaths or medical doctors are working with the patient, they're really trained to treat from symptoms to disease, and this is their realm of expertise. And when a naturopath is working with the patient, we are really trained to treat from symptoms to optimum health. So it's along the spectrum from optimum health to disease. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's just where our expertise is. And so as a naturopathic doctor, I'm coming to you with the idea of, all right, let's work on, working with if we have any symptoms and how can we create optimum health. So even when I look at labs for a patient, a medical doctor might see those same labs and say, you're fine. And I'll see the labs and say, ooh, we're heading towards diabetes. We need to start doing blank, blank, blank now to prevent that disease. So just a different way that we work on the spectrum of health. So now with the pandemic and our air quality challenges and the likelihood that these things will be going on in the future, it's a great time for us to look at optimizing our immune system. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. And because it's a small group, I am totally open. I don't need to have the slides up the whole time. I'm happy to be in gallery view. The slides are just a guideline. I'm very open to you cutting in all the time. Ask questions. Let's make this interactive. It's a small group, and I think it could be more engaging for everybody if everybody feels like they can ask a question. So immune system 101, I just have one, and I want to overwhelm people with the immune system because it's actually very complex. But I'm going to give you the simplified one paragraph version of the immune system so you can have a basis of what we're working from. So a definition of the immune system is an army consisting of various molecules. For example, our saliva, it's got IgA in it, or cells, for instance, our white blood cells, or organs, for instance, our skin, and hormones. And we'll talk about vitamin D. It's actually a hormone, it's not a vitamin. These things are an army to protect and defend us against foreign invaders. And how the immune system works, in essence, is it protects us. For instance, salivary IgA is our first line of defense for whatever we put in our mouth. If it has something that our immune system identifies as problematic, the salivary IgA, if working correctly, actually starts breaking that thing down immediately. Or it sends molecules, other molecules, to warn the rest of our immune system. It recognizes, so again, we have our white blood cells that actually identify whether or not something is friend or foe. And if the white blood cell, let's say, identifies a virus or a bacteria, it sends out, again, messengers so that our immune system starts to create a response. And then we get an alert if there's an invasion. So those are molecules called various things, but interleukins. If anybody's looking at coronavirus right now and how it responds in the immune system, there's a big interleukin response to the coronavirus. It actually helps people get over the coronavirus, but in many cases, the over response of the interleukins is what is causing fatalities from the coronavirus. It's the body overdoing the response to the virus that causes the lung congestion and those types of things. And then our immune system defends us. And you can think of that as something as simple as vomiting if we get food poisoning. It's our body's defense, our way of getting rid of or removing an attacker. And I want to make it really clear, because when people talk about the immune system, or when I have patients ask me about their immune system, it's often in terms of how we can make it better. And I want to frame that correctly, because increasing our immune system is not always making it better. What we want with our immune system is we want balance. Our immune system has these different functions, like protecting and alerting, and if we're not in balance, if the immune system isn't in balance, then we can over respond, like autoimmune disease. If somebody knows somebody with rheumatoid arthritis, or ankylosing spondylitis, or lupus, those are diseases where the immune system has gone too far and is over responding. And again, in coronavirus, coronavirus fatalities are due to an immune system dysregulation, where the immune system over responds and creates so much inflammation that our body can't keep up with it. So the goal with our immune system is to balance it, not to just increase it. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Any questions or concerns? So I'm moving on from the definition of immune system. And I think I can see half of you at a time, so I'll try and flip back and forth. So to start with, this is the tough stuff. Lifestyle. These things can make a huge impact, and they do make a huge impact. All these things I'm going to mention today have research behind them. So adequate sleep has a huge impact on our immune system. There's lots of reasons. You know, sense of well-being is really important for our immune system. But in addition, there's lots of research showing that 7 to 8 or 9 hours of sleep is really optimal for most people. And if you get less than that or more than that, a number of things happen. In addition to fatigue, diabetes goes up by more than double, and obesity for people that get less than 7 or more than 9 hours of sleep on a regular basis. And we'll talk about blood sugar balance is very important for immune system. So if you're not sleeping and you're tired, and or your blood sugars are dysregulated, that can impact an optimal immune system. Cortisol is our stress hormone, and cortisol, what happens over the course of a day, let's say, so a 24-hour period starting at, we'll go 4 a.m. Our cortisol is supposed to be at our highest at 4 a.m. Hopefully we're asleep. And then over the course of the day, our cortisol slowly goes down, so that before bed, our cortisol is near its low point. That allows our brains to turn off and us to wind down, hopefully, and to sleep. And then while we're sleeping, our cortisol, that stress hormone, that's its opportunity to build back up, so that first thing early in the morning, we'll have a high cortisol so we can wake up and meet the day and get things done and move through our day. When we don't sleep, our cortisol, that whole, what we call diurnal variation, or the daily variation of cortisol, it gets disrupted. And cortisol has a lot of impact on all of our other hormones. The hormones are like a web. And if one of the hormones gets tweaked out of the web, all the rest of the hormones shift. So cortisol, our stress hormone, impacts where our body puts sugar, how our body regulates insulin, which is a sugar regulating hormone. It affects our sex hormones. So you know, it's all connected is a good way to say it. So managing stress along with good sleep is also very important for balancing the immune system. For the cortisol reasons, for the blood sugar reasons, and because we know that when individuals are stressed, their white blood cells, so they're little Pac-Man cells that are supposed to identify the virus and bacteria, those white blood cells go down significantly. There's lots of great research on, mostly on medical students, that their rate of illness within the week after their finals exams is like 50% higher than when they're not in finals. So basically, it's actually the week after we're very stressed that we're much more susceptible to getting illness, because our white blood cells are still recovering. Our little Pac-Man cells have been decimated, and if we don't take care of ourselves by sleeping and balancing our blood sugar and breathing clean air, we're much more susceptible to a virus or bacteria. Healing your gut. So when we talked about the immune system and some of the things that, oh, I was going to go the other way. Our army, the gut is one of the really important places where we recognize invaders and defend ourselves. And the gut lining is, of course, where our body interacts with that world outside of us, in addition to our skin. But so anything we swallow, of course, hopefully is first met by our salivary IgA, and then our stomach acid breaks it down, and then our gut lining decides what gets into our actual system and what is excreted. And when our gut is compromised, either because we're stressed or we've had a lot of antibiotics and it's taken out our good flora in our gut, or we have chronic disease or a poor diet, then we actually think of the gut as a tube. And if the tube has holes in it from those things I just mentioned, the tube will allow more things into the body than should go in, basically. And so we want to keep our gut tube as solid as possible. And the ways to do that are regular bowel movements, being hydrated, eating good quality foods, which I'll go into next, and making sure you have good amount of flora in our gut. So the gut flora is you hear as probiotics or bacteria. And we want to have a good mix of those. It's another reason we want to have diversity. So a good healthy gut has depending on the research, 300 to 500 different types of bacteria in our gut. And those bacteria help us to identify foods and break them down. They actually are messengers for our immune system, for our sense of well-being. There's bacteria we know now in the gut that help us to feel better emotionally. So these bacteria, there's great research on this probiotics going on right now, but these bacteria have all kinds of impacts on our health and our well-being. And just like, especially for the folks out here in the valley, if you're working in a garden, you know how important it is to not grow just one thing, to make sure you get some inputs back into your garden at the end of a season. So, you know, you're using your compost. It's very similar to what needs to happen in our gut. We need a variety in our food. We need a variety of bacteria, and we need to care for it by having, you know, regular bowels, water, those types of things. So going on into diet, one thing I am really big on for my patients is getting a good source of probiotics in your diet. And I don't think that needs to come from a pill. I'm not against probiotic pills, but here's what I see in my patients is they start a probiotic pill because somebody at the health food store told them that was good to do. And then 3 years later, they come to me and they've been on the same one bacteria for 3 years. And I'm horrified because we want the diversity of that 500 different bacteria, and they've just kind of taken out their diversity by taking one thing for a long time. So I much prefer the use of food, especially local food, or I also love ethnic foods because so many ethnic foods or ethnic cultures offer good bacteria in their foods. So what I prefer is the use of the local sauerkraut. Here in the valley, we have such great options for local sauerkraut, or any kind of krauts or fermented foods. You know, I love the fermented garlics that you can buy here, and in the city. I'm a big fan of the local cheeses because those have naturally occurring bacteria in them. If you make your own kombucha, that's a great source of fermentation and probiotics. And think of those probiotics as, like I said, as nourishing your soil, basically, putting good things back into your gut so that things are being metabolized correctly. So yeah, I'm big on probiotics, and I will say I do encourage my patients to purchase a probiotic on occasion. One, if they just don't like any of the probiotic foods, though that is a talk for the future. There's always something to like. Kefir also is a really great tasting probiotic that kids will like. Or if they just went on an antibiotic and I really want to get them on probiotics quickly in a strong form, I'll use probiotics. I also use probiotics for specific medical conditions like depression, irritable bowel, skin conditions. So, but I'm very picky about which bacteria I'm using then, and then I'm being very specific which probiotics they're getting. All right, other things on a quality diet include caution with sugar. Sugar, we know, decreases immune function. It decreases the white blood cells. And that would be sugars in any form. That's alcohol, juice, your obvious candy and straight sugar. Honey, I'm going to put a little qualifier in because yes, it is a form of sugar, but it also has some immune boosting properties. So I think honey is a medicine as well as it can be abused. So I am a fan of honey for medical purposes and immune function. And then local diet, I'm a huge fan of for so many reasons, including our climate and our global health. But I know that's not possible for everybody all the time. And so I would just encourage whole foods. And we can talk, when I know what the group wants to hear, I can talk more specifics about diet. The other things I see in my patients that I see where a lot of improvements can be made in diets is lack of variety. I have a lot of patients that ate the same thing for most meals, most days. Actually, one thing I love about the pandemic is so many people are cooking at home now. And so I used to have a lot more, not with my Valley patients, but with my city patients, a lot more fast food types of diets. And that just is not an issue as much anymore. So that's been great. I see people that drink coffee all day, and coffee itself is not bad for the immune system. But when you add sugar to coffee, it makes it a sugary thing, which can trigger the immune system. And if you're drinking coffee instead of eating nourishing foods, because coffee is an appetite suppressant, that isn't supporting your system. And then too much coffee increases your cortisol level, which takes us back to the whole sleep issue, and cortisol not getting its diurnal rhythm throughout the day. So when I say too much coffee, I'd say when you're getting over, and it really depends on the person, but when you're getting over 2 cups a day, you're probably looking at getting into a little bit too much coffee. Or I will say caffeinated beverages. It's not limited to coffee.
Question.
Yeah.
If you don't like fermented foods, what are the other options for probiotic foods?
Well, what about yogurt? Do you like yogurt?
Yep, yogurt's good. Anything else?
And kombucha? No?
Yeah. No, I don't like that.
Miso soup.
Okay, look into that. All right.
And actually a lot of Asian foods, especially Korean foods, are great resources for fermented. I know that there's something you like. It's just a matter of finding it. And so, yeah, I would look at the Asian foods to start with, because they almost always serve something fermented either before the meal or with the meal as part of the digestive support.
Thank you.
Kimchi is strong, so you're probably not going to like that, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and ideally you get something along those lines in every day, but if you don't, I also have patients where I'm worried about their probiotics. Oh, you know what else I would say is anything from the garden. We don't wash our garden produce very well because I think dirt is super great for your immune system. And that's assuming you have a garden that doesn't use pesticides or that kind of thing. So if you go to the local farmer's market and you're buying that food and you're not being anal about washing it, and that's good probiotics. Dirt is excellent probiotics.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Let me just let folks know that a lot of you are muted, so if you're having trouble coming off of the mute, again, if you scroll around to the chat and click on that, you can put a question into the chat box and I'll look out for those.
Yeah, and that's great, Tracy, because I can't see the chat box easily from my view, so you just let me know.
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Oh, and another thing I was going to say about the probiotics is occasionally I do have a patient that's not going to be their game. They're not going to eat those foods, or they're not compliant for whatever reason. And I will have them get a probiotic and basically encourage them, any day you don't eat a probiotic food, then just take a probiotic. But then I also encourage them, don't get the same probiotic every time, because we want to get a mix. And, you know, and also there's a huge difference in quality of probiotic supplements, I will say. It was a while ago now, it was about 12 years ago, but Bastyr University went out and bought 20 different probiotic supplements, and then they sent them to a lab to look at them. And of the 20 supplements, only 4 actually had any live bacteria at all. And of those 4, only 2 had what they said was on the bottle. So I would just tell the majority of my patients, if you don't know and trust the company, or like a good naturopathic doctor will know what works. I mean, because we use it with our patients all the time. We know what works. I would, you know, I would do your research if you're taking a probiotic, because a lot of times it's not anything. It's not a live anything.
Do you have a couple off the top of your head that you could recommend?
Yeah, and I will say that that study was 12 years ago, and I definitely know there's a lot more in quality brands now. I think that study actually impacted the industry. So a couple of brands I like, and I don't have Glover Street memorized like what they have there. I like Ethical Nutrients is at the health food store. Culturelle is one that even the drugstores sell. But again, I use that for skin conditions. So some of these I use for different specifics. Interplexus is a good quality one. Yeah, those are some of the ones that I like. There's many more. Actually, my favorite but I don't know if you can get it at the store. I think it might be bought through a doctor or pharmacist. Target GBX is a specific one that has research that it supports mental health. I'm a big fan of that one. And there's actually other ones that support weight loss. Yeah, the probiotics, it's just a fun part of medicine right now because the research is coming out so rapidly. Okay, and then decrease in environment.
I have a quick question.
Yeah. Hi, Frauke.
Hi, Beth. Quantity or serving size. I mean, if we're going to take probiotics every day intentionally and not, you know, with our regular diet, how much should we be taking?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you know, because it's a bacteria, and theoretically, if it's set in the right environment, it will grow to, you know, to the balance it needs. Kind of like if you've made your own sauerkraut, or you made your own yogurt, you don't have to add in masses of the bacteria. You just have to add in enough to trigger the growth of the bacteria. So the good news is you don't need a lot, like a half a cup of yogurt, even a quarter cup of sauerkraut, just enough to set that bacterial growth in place. Yeah, even, you know, kombucha, a half a cup would be fine for the purposes. Your more is great, but yeah. And I would also caution, just thinking of some of the things my patients get themselves into, is you can do too much of, like, especially kombucha. I've had patients get into kombucha overload. It does have a little caffeine in it, and alcohol and sugar. And so there is also a balance. Yeah, like a glass a day would be good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And then just to be clear, each of these things that I've mentioned here in lifestyle factors, I've done a talk just on each of those things, right? So I'm like whipping through these items, but each of them deserves their own at least 1 to 2 hour talk as well. So we can go in deeper to any that interest you. And then decreasing environmental toxins. And this one is bigger and bigger all the time. I don't know if you just read the report that those LaCroix waters, and a lot of the waters, the fizzy waters, they just found out that had higher than acceptable levels of PFAs, which is basically what they make what are the things that go to the moon?
Rockets.
Yes, PFAs are what rocket fuel is made out of. Thank you. I'm a naturopath, not an aerial scientist. So yeah, PFAs are very toxic for our system. And because what ended up happening is these water companies that were making these fizzy waters, which my family loves LaCroix, they weren't using filtered water. They were just taking wherever they were getting their water source and then just making it fizzy water and sticking it in a can and calling it good. Not to mention the aluminum from the can that you're getting. So environmental toxins, even for people like myself that are study this all the time, they are ubiquitous. It's not a matter of getting rid of them. It's a matter of increasing your awareness about them so that you can minimize your exposure. And I'll tell you right now, with what I see with the pandemic is, one, I used to be the kind of person that loved to bring my own grocery bag to the store, but of course we're not supposed to do that anymore. So we have a lot of plastic bags. I'm always back and forth. Do I use the paper or the plastic bags? But we have the plastic bags a lot because we got filled up on paper bags. And so the plastic itself, we're carrying our food in the plastic, which has BPA and phthalates in it, which are both things known not only to increase obesity, but to decrease immune function and to increase our risk to certain diseases. But the big thing with the pandemic that I notice is that we're all using, rightly so, we're all using the antibacterial or antimicrobial hand wash. And then when we go shopping, we receive our receipts. And those receipts almost always, depends on the group, like PCC doesn't use this, but most stores use a receipt that's has BPA on the receipt. That shiny top of the receipt is a BPA lining. And BPA, again, increases obesity. It messes with our endocrine system. It compromises our immune function. And the research shows that when people hold a receipt on their hand, that they can actually take the blood and measure the BPA in a person's hand while they're holding the receipt. And women's hands, they can measure it twice as much because women tend to have thinner hands than men. And when people had that antimicrobial gel on, it went up by 3 times. So what we do when we put that antimicrobial gel is, when I was talking about, again, immune system protection, one of the protections is barriers, and one of our barriers is skin. And when we put that gel on, ironically, we take care of the bacteria, but we actually increase our exposure to other things in our environment, including whatever we touch, like plastic bags or the receipts, that type of thing. And so just to be aware of, yes, I do think we need the antibacterial gel. I'm not saying no. I just think it's important to be aware of what you touch after that until your skin is dry. And receipts, not a fan. So I don't use receipts much anymore. I get them on email as much as I can, or and my kids are horrified because if it's a pregnant cashier, I cannot help myself. I'm like, wear gloves. As long as you're working as a cashier, you just need to protect your skin from, I'm horrified by the thought that they're using that gel, touching those receipts all day long, and it's going right to that fetus. So my girls will just walk away because it's so embarrassing to have me have to tell that pregnant cashier. So yeah, just being aware of what we're exposed to. And again, I have an entire 1 to 2 hour talk on our environmental toxins, but here's the basics. Try and get clean water. Wash your vegetables, unless you know they came from a yard or garden or farmer that's not using pesticides. Minimize your plastics. So if you're buying You have a question?
Yeah, when you say wash your vegetables,
Yeah.
can you just rinse them or do you need to use something?
That's a good question. You know, mostly I think just rinsing them is fine, but there are a few things like the shiny coating on apples that are better to have use a wash so that you're getting rid of that shining coating, because there is some chemicals in the coating. So it kind of depends on the vegetable. And the other thing is, if it's a vegetable that you historically would, like a beet, where you're going to take off the skin anyways, I'm not so picky about it. And in general, I'm not so picky about it being organic. That's in general not always. And just so you know, the environmental working group, I can give you that information. But if you want to know, like, what are the things I should really focus on getting organic, and what are the things that are less important? The environmental working group every year puts out a list of what they call the dirty dozen, which is foods that tend to be more highly sprayed or chemical in the soil. And those are the foods that you really want to focus on getting organic. And then they have the clean 15, which are foods that are typically less concerning. Yeah. And there's foods like bananas, right, that have a peel. The thing is, how bananas are processed is they actually take bags that they spray with fumicide, and then they wrap the bag around the banana and the tree of bananas, and then they cut off all those bananas, and it essentially falls into a bag of chemicals. So the tree itself isn't grown with chemicals, but the bananas are dropped into a bag of chemicals until they're delivered to your grocery store, which is good because you don't want tarantulas crawling out of your bananas. But it's bad in the sense that, you know, then you might give the banana to your 2-year-old who's sucking on it while you're at the store, and that's not so good. So it's just being aware of maybe how your fruits and vegetables are produced. And then the banana, as soon as you peel it, as long as you're not peeling it and then touching every part of the banana with your hand, is perfectly fine on the inside. So I have suggested to patients, you might want to wash your bananas, even though the actual banana itself is fine. So yeah, a lot to know on those things.
I have
Yeah.
question, Beth. Do you recommend not just the pregnant teller, but those of us or everybody to use gloves more often when we're out and about in the grocery store?
That's a good question. Right now, you're saying for pandemic or always?
Yeah, when we're using, you know, the antibacterial sprays and whatnot, you know, should we just be using gloves and then taking the gloves off when we're outside of that environment?
Yeah, that's definitely a thought. There's pros and cons to it, right? Because the gloves themselves are often latex, which isn't necessarily toxic, but over time people start to react to it. And then there's also the whole thought about, do we want to all use gloves when the medical professionals really need to have those, and we don't want to limit a possible limited resource? And then I also think, depending on what we're touching, I also think we need to touch things, right? Like, especially when we're outside. So in the grocery store, I could see, you know, what would be nice is a reusable pair of gloves. It's sustainable. We're not using a resource. Maybe we could get something that's more solid than latex and less likely to leach into our skin. That would be the ultimate. Kid gloves, something along those lines. So yeah, I did go into a mall because my 12-year-old forced me to this fall for school shopping, and every single store insisted that which was good, that you use that gel. And then of course, every store wanted to give you a receipt. And that was a scenario where I just ended up putting on a pair of gloves. I didn't want to re-gel every time I walked into a different store. So I think it depends. But I think that's a good question. Or if you know you're really chemically sensitive, I would consider gloves for sure.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. And I had to throw in something on air pollution because it's not only something we're just recently getting over, and apparently, I know, Chris, you're on the west side. People on the west side might still have some air pollution going on right now. There's a lot of research on wildfire smoke, and I want to make it really clear. I wish I could talk to everybody, all the athletes in the valley on this one. When you have wildfire smoke, there's a certain size of particle, which is this PM 2.5 particle. That size and below, it gets into your lungs and it does not get out. It's not a particle that we just get to breathe back out. It's like when I was talking about the intestines being a tube, the lungs are like empty grapes, and all those grapes are walls, and all those walls, again, interact with our environment. And those particle sizes of 0.25 or 2.5 and below, they are small enough to actually get into the walls of our lungs. And so it's really important to recognize when the wildfire smoke is out there, you really do want to minimize your exposure because it's an irreversible exposure. It's not one we just get to recover from. And so I'm always horrified when I see people exercising out in the, and I know how good exercise feels, but I worry for their long-term lungs, and especially for the kids. So here's some of the things that does. And this is not only during the exposure, but it continues to cause damage for a few weeks after the exposure as well. Those particles, they increase inflammation. The endothelium is basically the lining of your blood vessels. So the lining of your blood vessels gets inflamed when you get exposed to these particles. And then it also calls in more white blood cells because our white blood cells are the part of the immune system that identify foreign particles. And so they're all on high alert when this air pollution is bad. Autonomic dysregulation of cardiac function, basically that means your heart doesn't work as well. So either you get irregular heart rate. We know there's an increased risk of heart attacks during poor air quality. And there's also something called heart rate variability, which basically think of it as when your heart rate variability is good, your heart is humming, it's happy, it's calm. And when your heart rate variability is not good, it means your heart it's stressed. Basically, it's a way of saying your heart's stressed out. And so we know that the heart is more stressed during poor air quality. There's also an increase in oxidative stress. It basically means breathing in that air sucks our antioxidants. So you think about it as your vitamin C or your bioflavonoids or all those good nutrients you're getting from your fruits and vegetables. Those get depleted in times of poor air quality. And so we actually need more of them at that point in time. And then a cytokine release that leads to systemic vascular inflammation. That means, again, the immune system is recognizing a foreign invader. It's putting out the alerts, and that means it's putting out these cytokines that cause inflammation. Our immune system doesn't know we can't get away from this smoke. Our immune system is just trying to react and protect us from a foreign invader. But what that does is it increases, again, our blood vessels, they clamp down, our blood pressure goes up, our ability to absorb oxygen goes down. And again, significant increases in things like heart attacks, and then things like below asthma and COPD and shortness of breath. So those things all go up. And the research is there to show it, that people, not only during these fires, but for a good month after the fires, there's significant increased rate of hospital visitations for all those conditions.
Question, does an N95 mask handle those PM 2.5 particles?
Yes, it does. Yep, N95 or above does. And so good question, because, right, we want to really decrease our exposure by not only avoiding exercise outside if we can, but wearing those masks when we're outside. And then of course it'd be important that the mask filter is relatively clean and that that there's not big gaps in the mask, so that it's a good fit. Yeah, and then of course the other things would be in your home, having doors and windows closed. If you have an air conditioning or heating system that has a MERV 13 filter or more, is considered adequate to block those particles. So that in our home, we had a MERV 5 filter, so we had to go order a special filter to block the 2.5 particles. So I think our home's built in 98. I think some of the newer homes might have a MERV 13. It's basically a thickness of the filter in your heating or air conditioning. But it's worth looking at. And then of course an air purifier, which I bet you can't even get right now, but when they're back on the market or if they're available, I think it's worth the investment to get one. And then again, make sure the filters are clean on it.
The other one, Beth, that you know, we've been using a lot is the box fan, and then you can just buy the MERV 13. So that's
yeah, that's a great idea. And a friend from Seattle sent me their box fan after a day, and you could see the brown where the fan had been for one 24-hour period inside their home. Yeah, so they definitely work. Okay, the good news, along with trying to decrease your exposure to that smoke, and especially I would emphasize susceptible individuals. I mean, I think it's everybody because those particles stay in your system, but somebody with a known cardiovascular disease or asthma, small kids, the elderly, smokers, those are all people that have to be very careful. There are some things nutrient-wise that can help recovery, including folic acid, and I put the exact amounts here because the research was there, but you can write it down if you want. But basically, folic acid, vitamin B6, and vitamin B12, or I might even say just a good quality B complex would be really great for helping with recovery. It helps decrease the inflammation of those particles. It helps normalize that heart rate. So when I was talking about heart rate variability, or the heart being able to hum versus being stressed, it helps decrease the heart stress. It also helps regulate the white blood cell count, and lymphocytes are a type of white blood cell. Just a second. Hey, Samra, are you okay? No, you're fine. Just a second. My 12-year-old needs to go somewhere and she wants me to move the camera. Okay, go.
Oh, we want to see her.
Nope, she's 12. 15. Okay. All right. Fish oil is also helpful, and 1.6 grams, which is usually about 3 fish oil caps or a tablespoon of fish oil. And if you've never done fish oil, you probably want to do it with food because it'll make you a little fish burpy if you take it away from food. But fish oil is great for a lot of things, but it helps particularly to help calm the heart again. And then sulforaphane is actually derived from broccoli. So you could eat a ton of broccoli, but it is a lot of broccoli to get this much sulforaphane. It comes in a capsule, and there's great research showing that people with poor air quality do better with it. It's like a good antioxidant. It's also a really strong anti-cancer supplement, sulforaphane. So I use it a lot if I have a patient that's at high risk for cancer. And then N-acetylcysteine, I will say this is my go-to. I feel naked if I don't have it in my cabinet. It's particularly great for, think of it as a lung detoxifier. It's something that our liver makes, and it actually is really great for breaking up mucus. And our bronchioles, which is the tube between our mouth and our lungs, they have little hairs in them. And those hairs are supposed to help be the filter and help also bring things back up out of the lungs. So if there's any chance we're going to get those 2.5 microgram particles out, It's by supporting the bronchioles and those little bronchial hairs and helping decrease the mucus in our lungs. And that's exactly what N-acetylcysteine does. It decreases lung inflammation. It decreases that cytokine that we were talking about, where our immune system alerts, and sometimes it can over alert. And I'm not going to say that anything here is a treatment for coronavirus, because we're talking about balancing the immune system, and because it's not okay to say something will treat coronavirus. But when I'm working with a patient and they want to know the things they should have on hand in case they get exposed to or trying to avoid an exacerbated response to coronavirus, the things I tell them include N-acetylcysteine and vitamin C. Those I would definitely have on hand, as well as another supplement I'll mention later. And I just take this every day right now because of the pandemic, and then because of the poor air quality, and I'm still recovering from the poor air quality. So I'm going to be taking it for a little while, and then I'll probably take a break, because I also think a supplement vacation is a good idea. But, and the one thing with N-acetylcysteine, and of course, I don't know everyone's health history. If you want to know specifics for you and what you should take, that's a good time to schedule an appointment with me, because I don't just like throw out supplements and tell people to take them. I want to know your history and your susceptibilities and your allergies. And there's a lot of personal information that I take into consideration before I set somebody up on a plan. But I will say N-acetylcysteine does not have any medical interactions with medications. It's not a blood thinner. The only contraindication is for some individuals, it can cause reflux. So if I have somebody that already has reflux or GERD, I would probably be careful about it. And I take mine with food so that nothing happens. But it's a pretty safe supplement. And then vitamin C, also very safe. And it decreased airway irritation when taken up to 4 times a day. That's a pretty small dose and pretty easy to take. And then here's some other supplements that are often suggested for immune balancing. And you'll see that I don't have echinacea in here, and echinacea is a great supplement. When people think immune, they think echinacea. The reason I don't have it in here is because it does increase white blood cell count, which is great, but it also can, my patients take it too much. How would I say it? I have to often take people off echinacea because they've been taking it every day for months on end, and that's not how it works. We don't want, more is not better. We don't want to keep boosting our immune system, because after a while, immune system will go like, I got to rest, and it will do a little crash. And so I oftentimes have patients taking echinacea and then they get sick. And I think it's because they were trying to do too much pushing of the white blood cells. Green tea is, it blocks viral replication, which seems like that could be a good effect right now. It's up to 4 cups a day is really a good dose. And then of course that has caffeine in it. So you'd also have to be careful about your caffeine intake. But green tea also has an anti-inflammatory effect. I personally, my body says no to green tea, so it's not for everybody, but it is a good thing to have on hand right now just as an immune support. Turmeric is excellent. It has lots of anti-inflammatory properties. It has bioflavonoids, which is an antioxidant support. So that's a great one, not only for poor air quality, but just to have on board during the pandemic. Turmeric in your food is also excellent, but the amount of turmeric you have to eat to get the medicinal effects is way more than most people are going to go for. You probably would turn your skin a little yellow. So I usually use turmeric in a capsule form for my patients. Elderberry, which is local right now in the Valley, is excellent immune balancing, super nourishing for your immune system. There's some research coming out that while I think it would be great to take before coronavirus, like while you're trying to prevent it, for certain individuals, it is not good for when you have coronavirus. And that would be something to talk to your naturopathic doctor about, because it depends on the person and their genetics. So I think it's a great pre-thing to be taking. And then vitamin C we talked about. Vitamin D is actually, like I said, not a vitamin. It's a hormone. And it's really important for balancing our immune system. And actually, we can't absorb certain nutrients without it, like calcium doesn't get absorbed without vitamin D. And vitamin D is actually really important for our sense of well-being too. So it's vitamin D they're doing a lot more research on too now. And then N-acetylcysteine we mentioned, and then finally zinc. This is the other thing. So the things I would have on hand if I was wanting to do a nice immune support is vitamin C, vitamin D for the winter if you're not getting outside. And I prescribe different amounts for my patients of color. So the darker your skin, the more vitamin D you need. But in general, if you're on the white pale side, I would say about 2,000 IUs per day, September through May, or basically when you're not getting 20 minutes of sun exposure on your arms and legs a day. And that vitamin D, that's on average, which means you could take your whole week's worth once a week and call it good. It works the same. And then zinc is the other thing I would have on board. Zinc is really, it's a very common deficiency. I test my patients when I'm at the office. I check their zinc status, and I would say 10% of my patients, when they first come into the office, have normal levels of zinc. So 90% are deficient. Zinc's really important for connective tissue strength. So when I was talking about that tube of the intestine, part of healing that tube has to do with having adequate zinc levels. Same with the lungs. The zinc helps heal that connective tissue. And we know that zinc is a immune supportive nutrient as well. Zinc will make you nauseous on an empty stomach though, so I have people take it with their meals.
Foods high in zinc?
Oysters are the highest food in zinc. Yeah, but Brazil nuts are really high. Actually, lots of nuts are high in zinc. And it's worth looking it up and looking at what's high in zinc and seeing if you're getting that in your diet or if you're willing to get it in your diet. Because I'm a huge fan of just getting it in your food. That being said, 90% of my patients aren't. And I'm sorry for the fuzzy here. This is just a little gift, if you want, for making your own immune balancing elixir. And this, I will say, this is kind of like an electrolyte drink. I find that electrolyte drinks don't taste good when I'm not exercising, but once I start sweating, they taste great. And this is how this Oxymel is that in the middle of summer, I don't like it, but come cold fall, this starts really hitting the spot. So it's like my body knows when it needs it. And this is just an example of one. Basically, it's just a little immune supportive, warming, nourishing elixir that you can put in a tea or with fizzy water type of thing. And you could do the same thing, switching the ginger root out for elderberry, especially if you have a local elderberry tree or something like that. So you can switch out the herbs, but this is a really nice thing that you can make for yourself that feels really nourishing. I'll leave that on for just a minute and then I'll take it out. Okay, so I'm ready for questions if anybody has any.
Yeah, and just make sure, everybody, that you find your little mute and unmute yourself, because unfortunately I can't do it from here. I can't unmute.
What about a multivitamin just to get your basics?
Oh, I think a multivitamin is a great idea. And it is a good way to get your basics. I'm very picky about the types of multivitamins. I am not a fan, for the most part, of tablets. I used to work next door to radiology, and you could actually see, so they would take x-rays of people's chest, and you could see little tablets lined up in their stomach. So I wasn't convinced that tablets are always broken down, especially in people over 60, because over 60, you have less stomach acid and you don't break things down as well. So I prefer capsules or powder. Liquids, okay, but it usually comes with sugar. And then I'm also picky about the sources of the vitamins. There's definitely a difference in quality. So again, you know, personalizing that would be working with a naturopath or somebody that knows new supplements. But a good thing to look for is capsule, no artificial ingredients. One of the things I look for is if there's vitamin E in it. This is like the one thing I can go to know if they're going on the cheap or not. Vitamin E is in the natural form is D-alpha tocopherol or mixed tocopherols. And when they use synthetic vitamin E, it's cheaper and it's D-L-alpha tocopherol. So the only difference is they add it's the D-L. But if I wanted just to take one peek at a vitamin and know if they're just going on the cheap or not, I look at the vitamin E. And if they use synthetic, which essentially is worthless, I know that the vitamin's not quality. So yes, vitamin, but quality matters. And I'm also, like I said, I'm a fan of vitamin vacations. So if you take a multi, I think it's great. And then maybe 2 days a week, you take it off, or 1 week a month, so that your body doesn't get used to the same thing all the time. And the other thing I see my patients do occasionally is they take a vitamin instead of eating a quality diet. And if I had to choose, I would choose the quality diet over the vitamin, but ultimately I'd want both.
Frauke, did you have a question? You're muted again. I thought I heard you.
I did, but I was actually able to copy the Oximal.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, was going to ask if you could send that out to us, and maybe other people would like it. So.
All right, there's everybody.
Well, I have a question, but I'm not sure that I'm unmuted.
You are.
You are.
We can hear you.
What about absorption, like calcium absorption?
Good question. So calcium cannot be, so when I started my practice 21 years ago, if we had a patient with low bone density, what we did was we put them on really high dose calcium. We put them on 1,500 milligrams of calcium because they needed more calcium to build their bones. And then about 15 years ago, new research came out that showed, well, you can't absorb calcium if you are deficient in vitamin D. That vitamin D hormone is essential to absorbing calcium. And so at this point in my practice, if I have, with all the research and things, I found that very rarely were my patients deficient in calcium, unless they were purposely avoiding calcium-rich foods. So actually, I might prescribe maybe up to 500 milligrams of calcium max for somebody with osteoporosis. But what I really look at is making sure they're getting vitamin D. It's actually more important than the calcium for the calcium absorption. And so I'll ensure they're getting that 2,000 IUs, or like I say, if I have an African-American patient, I'm getting them at least 3,000 IUs of vitamin D a day.
Great, thank you. The vitamin D makes sense.
Yeah.
Question?
Yeah.
Is there a difference in the Ds as to what D we should have? Somebody in the health food store next to me said, oh, you've got to have D3 and so on. So what's the story there?
There is a little difference. Basically is, are you taking the D precursor, or are you taking the vitamin D? I have most of my patients just take D3 because I know they're just getting it then.
D3 is what I want.
Vitamin D3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is NAC? I've never even heard of it, and I have no idea how to spell it, but apparently the initials are enough. But
right. So NAC, and then initials are enough. If you went to look for that, that would get you it. It stands for N-acetyl, and then blank, and then cysteine, cysteine. So N-acetylcysteine, which is actually naturally made in our body, but right now I think we could use more.
sure.
And you know what I'll give you also is, if you go to my website, let's see, I can write it in the chat and I'll say it at the same time. My website is fwnmedical.com. And on that website, okay, so that just went to everybody in the chat. If you go down to the chat screen, you should be able to pull that up and see fwnmedical.com. So that's the website for my clinic. On that, as soon as you get on that website, you'll see a full script, which is an icon that says full script. That basically takes you to an online dispensary. And you can purchase whatever you want there. I think if you purchase a certain amount, there's no shipping or anything like that. But everything I talked about is accessible on that. And honestly, I'd much rather you use that website than Amazon, because that website supports naturopathic and alternative medicine, and Amazon does not. So if you're going to go online shopping, that would be my preference. But I'm also, Glover Street has a lot of these things if you're in the Valley, and Marlene's, if you're on the West Side, would have these things.
What about, so the D3, is there a better form to take it? Like I have a Source Naturals liquid, does it go bad?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I'm very picky about some supplements, and vitamin C and vitamin D, I'm not very picky about. They're both pretty inexpensive to make, so there's not a lot of reason to skimp on the quality. And then the liquids, I think they have a shorter out date, at least the liquids that I sell. That's the only downside of them. I like the liquids a lot for families because I can give my kids one dose and my husband a different dose, and so it's nice. And the only other thing with the liquids is vitamin D is kind of an oil, and so you need to shake them really well, otherwise you're not getting the same dose with every drop.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and then I would not get, I haven't even seen it, but I would not take vitamin D in a tablet form. It's an oil, it shouldn't be. The thing with tablets is they have to be heated and pressed in order to be formed. And for a lot of nutrients, that destroys the nutrient. So I don't like oils heated. So I wouldn't do D in a tablet.
Well, thank you so much, Beth. That was
Yeah.
a wealth of information. I'm going to just stop the recording real quick.